A lot of people are interested in ways or methods or techniques that could extend longevity. There's all kinds of ways to do that. There's a lot of science about it. There's researchers around that claim that, there's one guy named Audrey Dubray or something. I think it's Audrey Dubray, kind of eccentric British guy who he claims that pretty soon people will be able to live to age 1,000, which is really, there's a lot of let's say standard longevity researchers that don't agree with that. Most of the researchers say that, the maximum, it varies. Some of them say that the maximum human lifespan for most people is only about 85. The country with the longest lifespan in the world is Japan, which women there live to 84. A little bit less in the United States. But other researchers will look at the woman who holds the record for the greatest longevity, which is a French woman named Jean Calment, who she lived to the age of 122. She was she actually met Vincent van Gogh. That's how way back she goes, the artist. And the thing about her is that, she didn't really follow any particular health regime. That a lot of these people today, they do crazy things. They completely restrict calories where they're eating almost nothing. A lot of people do, take various supplements, all in the hopes of extending their lives. But people like Jean Calment did nothing special. She smoked cigarettes until she was 116 years old. She liked to drink wine. She ate about a pound of chocolate a week. She broke a lot of the rules. But, why did she live that long? Well, a good hint is that her father lived to 96. Her mother lived into the late 80s. She had a brother who lived into the 90s. She just had really good genetics. And there's another reason why this is going to piss a lot of people off. You're not going to believe what I'm about to say. First of all, the one thing that impresses me about Jean Calment, besides the fact that she lived that long, and by the way, the last couple of years of her life, she was completely blind and deaf, but she's still alive. But the thing that impressed me, she never showed any signs of senility or dementia. She was still, they did some tests on her when she was something like 115, showed no signs of dementia or Alzheimer's or anything like that, which is very impressive, and which also is proof that, contrary to what some researchers say, Alzheimer's is not inevitable. There's some idiot researchers that actually say everybody who lives long enough is going to get Alzheimer's. That's bullshit. Because Jean Calment and a lot of other people who lived to over 100, they never got Alzheimer's, they never got dementia. But I think one of the features of the reason why Jean Calment lived so long, are you ready for this? She was 4'6". That's all, 4'6". And let me tell you, I've been studying longevity as a personal hobby, if you want to call it. The older like most people, the older I get, the more interest I have in longevity, including possibly maximizing my own. So it's become, I looked at what they call geroscience, G-E-R-O, geroscience, the study of longevity. I've been doing this for about 20 years. I write about it a lot in my, 20 years ago is when I first started to become aware of my own, let's say, mortality. So I started studying longevity science. I've been studying it ever since. I read a ton of research. A lot of it I write in my Applied Metabolics publication, but I'm always looking for this kind of stuff. And the one thing I've noticed, if there's a pattern at all among people, let's say, who live to over 100, there's a couple of things that emerge. One of them is that they're usually what they call genetic mutants. In the sense that it's not that they're grotesque or anything like that. It's the fact that they have unusually effective DNA repair mechanisms. DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the blueprint of cells. It controls genes. When the DNA gets mutated in a certain way, that can cause cancer. But there's another way where if the DNA it replicates, in cell replication. When the cells replicate, the DNA replicates with it, and after a certain number of replications, the DNA starts to kind of like get, not to the point, it gets kind of damaged, not to the point of causing cancer, but to the point where you start to see signs of aging. And this usually occurs when these little kind of strings at the end of chromosomes called telomeres, they shorten with each cell replication. And when they get to the point where the telomeres are gone, the cell goes into what they call a senescent state, which means it's no longer replicating, it's basically just sitting there. And unfortunately, senescent cells secrete very inflammatory chemicals which cause all kinds of degenerative diseases, and a lot of the effects of aging are caused by the systemic inflammation from chemicals or substances, or cytokines as they're called, that are released from senescent cells. They're also called zombie cells. Now, how does that relate to old people who live to over 100? Well, the people who live to over 100, for some reason, have some sort of mutation where they have a much greater ability to repair DNA. And if you could repair the DNA, you just live a long time. The cells don't age as fast. I mean, they might look older on the outside, but they're not aging like other people do, and they're not entering that horrible systemic inflammation state, which in one way or another kills people, because systemic inflammation is associated with the killer diseases, cardiovascular disease and cancer. So the people that don't have the excessive amount of senescent cells, they don't get the killer diseases, and that's one of the things that allows them to to make it to 100 or more. But one of the things I've noticed about in my research over the years, if you look at the people that are studied today, the older people who make it to 100, almost without exception, just like Jean Calment, they're very short. Most of them are, the men are like, barely 5 feet tall. The tallest men are like 5'2". The women could be Jean Calment's height, 4'6", 4'2". I mean, they're practically midgets. Why are all these old people who make it to advanced ages so short? Well, my theory about that, and there's some research that shows this, relates to a hormone in the body called insulin-like growth factor 1. Now, bodybuilders know IGF-1 because it's an anabolic hormone. IGF-1 is produced in the liver when you release growth hormone from the pituitary gland. It gets to the liver and it stimulates the production of IGF-1 in the liver. IGF-1 is also produced directly in muscle, and the IGF-1 that's produced directly in muscle stimulates the activity of muscle stem cells called satellite cells, which are involved in the repair and growth of muscles. So when you, let's say, break down a muscle when you're working out, it'll stimulate the local IGF-1 in muscle, and there's 3 variants of it in muscle. One of them is called mechanical growth factor, will actually stimulate the repair and growth of muscle. So it's very anabolic. IGF-1 in muscle is actually more anabolic than some of the more famous anabolic hormones, including testosterone and insulin. IGF-1 with let's say, intramuscular IGF-1 is probably the most anabolic substance in the body. Now, that's the good part about IGF-1. The bad part, and this more relates to the systemic version of IGF-1 that's produced in the liver, is that IGF-1, well, there's a good and bad part. It's like a double-edged sword. The good part about systemic IGF-1 is it maintains the heart cells, it maintains the neurons in your brain, and it maintains connective tissue. Without IGF-1, your connective tissue breaks down because all kinds of injuries, soreness and joint problems, that's what happens when you don't get enough IGF-1. Unfortunately, too much IGF-1 has also been linked to a more rapid rate of aging, and also some studies, and this is still debatable, IGF-1 stimulates a process called mitosis, or cell division. Now, cancer is a process that involves uncontrolled cell division. So the idea is that IGF-1 can kind of like, it's almost like putting, what do they call it? The stuff they put on plants to make them grow. It's like it stimulates cancer. That's what some scientists believe. IGF-1, and sure enough, humans that, let's say, show a relative deficiency, there's certain forms of dwarfism where they have a resistance to IGF-1. Of course, they are short because of the lack of growth hormone in IGF-1, but they never get cancer. They seem to be cancer-free. And that's one bit of evidence showing that IGF-1 is related to cancer. The kind of cancers that IGF-1 is related to are breast cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer. However, if you look at it from a common sense point of view, growth hormone and IGF-1 peak, as does testosterone, during the teenage and early adult years. That means you have the highest production at that time of life. If IGF-1 was truly a carcinogen and or testosterone, that means none of us would be alive past maybe 21. We'd all die of cancer. So obviously there's more to it. This is why it's debatable. How does this relate to people over 100? Well, the people over 100, one of the reasons that they're very short is because they do produce IGF-1 enough to maintain their heart and their brain and their connective tissue, but there's a relative resistance at the receptor level. So in other words, the IGF-1 is, let's say, partly cut off. And the part that's cut off, and I'm simplifying, it's much more complex than this, but the part that's, let's say, cut off in older people who have this kind of mutation where IGF-1 resistance at the receptor level, they don't get the aging effects associated with IGF-1. And that's, again, one of the reasons why these people live to over 100, because they have a relative resistance to IGF-1, and that also makes them very short. Okay, now taller people listening to this might be saying, wait a minute, does this mean that tall people are doomed to not make it to advanced ages, let's say over 100? Well, my answer to that is look around. Look around. How many people that are, I'm talking really tall, I'm not talking, 6'2", 6'4", I'm talking, let's say, over 6'7" or 7 feet and over, like NBA players. Look at how many make it to 100. I think the answer will be 0. So, unfortunately, the truth is that, being very tall might be an advantage in certain aspects of life if you want to play professional basketball, that kind of thing. But from the point of view of longevity, you're kind of born with a, what's it called? Your time is limited. If you're a very tall person, you're not going to probably make it to 100. Very, very doubtful. And it's probably because of the IGF-1 that made you tall in the first place. So, but one thing I wanted to talk about here in this video is a new study that came out in February 2023. It was published in the journal Nature Aging, and it basically said that reducing the one sure way to slow the aging process is restricting calorie intake. Now, this is the researchers from Columbia University School of Public Health. They used DNA analysis from blood samples to measure the rate of aging, and they reported that calorie restriction actually slowed the aging process. The participants in the study included 220 healthy men and women in 3 different sites in the United States. They continued with their regular diet or had a 25% reduction in their consumed calories. The scientists followed the study subjects' diet and health for 2 years, took blood samples at the start of the study and again at 12 months and 24 months. And what they reported at the end of the 2 years was a definite slowed aging process based on 3 DNA markers in the people that reduced their calories by 25%. Now, this is nothing really new. Calorie restriction has been talked about for years. Animal studies of just about many species, dogs, cats, mice, fish, monkeys, they've all shown if you reduce the total daily calorie intake in these animals by an average of 30 to 35%, it seems to extend their lifespan. And it seems to delay or prevent some of the major degenerative diseases that kill people. Now, the thing about it is that they tried to do this. There was a similar study to this. They tried to do this with humans a couple of years ago. They had, again, they put humans on they took humans and they put them on a diet that averaged 25, just like this study, 25% reduced calories, and the people couldn't handle it. Most of them could not take it, so they had to drop down to only 12% calorie reduction. The people could not handle a 25% daily calorie. It was just too much. So they cut it down to 12% calorie reduction, and even with 12%, the study didn't go on long enough to measure whether these people live longer, but they did notice a number of health benefits: increased insulin sensitivity, better glucose control, lower body fat, lower blood pressure, better overall heart function, better brain function. So there is something to reducing calories. However, the people, who've taken this to heart, there's something called the Calorie Restriction Society, where these people have taken this animal research. I should point out, there's no evidence that going on an extreme calorie restriction diet, when I say extreme, I'm talking 30% of daily calories or less, there's no human evidence that it's going to extend life. In fact, some scientists who've looked at it closely, they suggest that the average increased lifespan you'll get with a 30% reduction in calories begun at midlife, let's say middle age, would be a maximum of 7 years. Now, 7 years is the same amount of added life you would get simply by engaging in regular exercise and not doing negative health habits such as smoking and drinking. So, I also believe that one of the reasons why cutting the calories down, especially as you age, will help extend life is because of lower body fat. Having a lot of body fat is very bad for longevity because fat cells secrete over 100 different proteins, collectively called adipokines, that are very inflammatory. And it can, as I mentioned earlier, systemic inflammation is the cornerstone of cardiovascular disease, cancer, and all the big killer diseases, diabetes. So simply by reducing fat, body fat, I believe by keeping your body fat low as you age and engaging in regular exercise to work your heart, your brain, keep your brain intact and working, I believe you can get just about all the benefits of calorie restriction. And not only that, but even if you don't get extended life from these, let's say, exercising and eating properly and keeping your weight down, keeping your body fat down, what you will definitely get is what they call increased health span, meaning that you will avoid the major killer diseases all the way to the end. You're not going to transform an 80-year-old person back into a 20-year-old, but what you will do is allow these people to avoid the major killer diseases. So, if they do get those diseases, it won't happen until very late in life. So, anyway, the point of this video is that, this study showed that the people that reduced their daily calorie intake by 25% actually did show a reduced rate of aging as measured by DNA methylation. In other words, apparently lowering your calories by 25% will reduce the damage to DNA, which will equal, let's say, greater longevity. Unfortunately, this study lasted 2 years. The only true way to find if a calorie reduction like that really extends longevity would be to follow it for the full life of a person, which is prohibitively expensive. It'll never happen. So not only that, but as I pointed out earlier, the previous human study where they put people in the same calorie reduction, 25% of people couldn't handle it. Every one of them couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle more than a 12% calorie reduction, which is the average amount of calories that you would get on a regular diet. Furthermore, there's some researchers who study intermittent fasting. There's various types of intermittent fasting I've talked about in previous videos. A lot of these researchers say you can get at least 90% of the benefits of full calorie restriction as far as health benefits and possible life extension simply by engaging in intermittent fasting, about maybe 2-3 times a week, whatever you can handle. It'll give you most of the benefits of severe calorie restriction without the starvation effects. I would never recommend let's say the animal type calorie restriction for a human, because it cuts all the anabolic hormones down to nothing. Testosterone, growth hormone, all of them go down, and you're going to lose a crap load of muscle. I mean, if you look at the people that do this voluntarily, I'm talking about severe calorie restriction. I mean, they look like human bean poles. I mean, they look like starvation victims. The guys are, some of these guys who do this are like 6 foot tall and weigh 125 pounds. They look like human skeletons. So anyone interested in muscle, you do not want to do calorie restriction. I mean, I mean, you just won't have any muscle. However, intermittent fasting is a much safer way to do it. So that's about it for this thing. Like I say, also I should point out a recent study, and this was very interesting to me, and it's very bad news for these humans that are voluntarily starving themselves in the hope of living longer. They found out that calorie restriction, the severe calorie restriction, I'm talking 30-35% daily calorie reduction or restriction, only works. This is animal experiments, mice, rats. It only works, you ready for this? If begun in infancy. If you start in middle age, no benefits at all. All these people that are, killing themselves, starving themselves, they're not going to get any added longevity benefits at all, except they might, because just by reducing those calories, yes, they're gaunt, they're thin, they have no muscle, but because they're low in body weight, their blood pressure is low, their blood glucose is low, their blood insulin is low. All that, will actually prevent stuff like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, possibly even cancer. So they actually might get some life extension out of it. But it's not really from the restricted calories. It's because they're so low in body weight, and they're eating so little food that they have very little, like I said, very little body fat. There's not much systemic inflammation. That's what's really causing the beneficial effects. And you could probably get that from a combination of exercise and intermittent fasting. You don't have to starve yourself. So I'll leave it at that. If you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, and by the way, I've had several articles in my Applied Metabolics on various the science behind intermittent fasting, various techniques to do it, ways to improve intermittent fasting. All of that is in my Applied Metabolics. I also cover hormonal therapy, anti-aging research, exercise science, supplement science, which ones work, which ones don't, ergogenic aids, women's health and fitness. I cover more topics in Applied Metabolics than any other digital publication. It's 30 to 45 pages every month, no ads. Comes out on the first of every month. And it's at www.appliedmetabolics.com. I guarantee you will learn something from every issue. And it's practical information that you could use today. So subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, you can send me an email. I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise, and general science. I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only, you have to be a current subscriber, can send me short questions about anything they might have read in Applied Metabolics or anything else that interests them related to fitness and nutrition. I'll answer them as a bonus for their subscription. So that's about it. If you want more, I already said that. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. And by the way, just as a side note, there's some studies going on where they've extended the lifespan of, most people who have dogs know the big tragedy about owning a dog, not owning a dog. I don't like to say that because it makes dogs sound like slaves. The big tragedy about having a dog friend is that they have relatively short lives, which is very, very tragic. When the dog dies, it's a horrible situation emotionally. I know I've been through it several times, and but there's this ongoing studies show that if you give a chemical called rapamycin to older dogs, it extends their lifespan. It actually works. It extends their lifespan as much as 3 years, and that's 3 extra years with a beloved dog. I'm a little hesitant. First of all, rapamycin is it's a immunosuppressant. There's humans that are taking it now. I don't think that's a great idea in this age of COVID to take something that's known to suppress immune response. That's why I wouldn't take it. But, they only take it once a week or so. Just don't think it's a good idea. You can get the same effect by, I've talked about in other videos, by controlling a substance called mTOR, but I'm not going to go into it here, but I just thought I'd throw that in. Take care. Thanks for listening.